It is exactly 17 after 9 o'clock. Welcome to the program, the second half of News and Views with me, Julie Ali. We also cross over to Polokwane and our listeners in Polokwane on One Nation FM. Good morning, welcome, and we do hope you're going to stay with us for the second hour of the show. We kick off by talking about the big news of the day, obviously, is the midterm budget. Which is going to be announced this afternoon by Enoch Godongwana. And lots of questions around the midterm budget, lots of expectations, lots of trepidation as well as to what it's going to look like, who's going to be taxed higher, where's the money coming from, is that going to ease the burden on us as taxpayers, and the extra taxes that's being collected from us, is it going to try and address the issues that we're grappling with in the country? But more importantly as well, higher public sector wages, is that a reality? So to talk to us about all of those issues is Trevor Shaku. He is South African Federation of Trade Unions spokesperson. Trevor, very good morning to you. Welcome to the program.
Good morning and thanks for having us.
Lovely to have you. Are you hopeful as far as the midterm budget is concerned, and very especially higher public sector wages? Do you think that's going to be factored in?
We do not think that it would be factored in. If you would recall, the Minister of the Department of Public Service and Administration, Thulas Nxesi, would have invoked a particular provision in the Act of Public Service Administration that would require him to, without any agreement in the Public Service Coordinating Bargaining Council, to merely impose an increase, 3% increase, which workers are clearly rejecting for the financial year 2022-2023. That is the first part. So we think on the basis of that, the attitude of the minister in the medium-term budget policy statement is going to reflect what Thulas was already trying to invoke at the beginning of this week and the end of last week. But secondly, is that they have actually demonstrated over time through what they call a fiscal consolidation program that for the next coming 3 years, starting with the financial year 2020-2021, that they are not going to increase any budget for various kinds of expenditure in government because of what they call fiscal consolidation. They've adopted a program that will last for the coming 3 years. So it's a 5-year program called fiscal consolidation. The purpose of it is premised, first of all, it's premised on the assumption that government debt is very high, the fiscus is bloated, and there is what they call fiscal risks or fiscal unsustainability. And on the basis of that, this fiscal consolidation thereof wants to then cut areas of expenditure in order to reduce that particular debt. So we do not have any optimism around whether this minister would table any budget that will try by all means to begin to inject more expenditure on public goods and services, including on the public service institutions such as schools, hospitals, but also in state corporations.
Okay, exactly to what you're saying. We understand that Treasury is set to pencil in more for the already bloated, this is what they're saying, bloated public sector wage bill after the government upped its salary increase offer to 3%, which indicated was much lower, obviously. The revised outlay on the consolidated wage bill could be upwards of 20 billion rands more for the years 2022 and 2023. It is more than envisaged in February, as was noted by them. However, you, as one of the public sector unions, have rejected the government 3% wage offer. You're demanding 6.5%. The South African Reserve Bank is saying that wage hikes have the effect of pushing inflation even higher, which may lead to further interest rate hikes. What do you say to that? And what do you think your members are going to say to that?
The problem of the South African Reserve Bank, just as is the problem of the Treasury in the country, is that it is premised on neoliberal understanding of monetary systems, of economics. Now, because of that, for them, inflation is always a result of too much money chasing few goods in the economy. And we do not think that that is actually a proper explanation, especially in the context of today, where you have idling capacity, both of machinery in terms of manufacturing and also of humans or human resource, in as much as the unemployment is so high. So the first part for us is that what ought to be what can be used to fight inflation if, for instance, they think that increasing the public sector wages or the public service wages is concerned, is that they must, in our view, make sure that they ramp up production in manufacturing, ensure that they move manufacturing capacity from where it is. At the current moment, there is more than 20% of manufacturing capacity that is not utilized, that is idling. If you begin to power that on, hire more workers, and ensure that there is more production. Similarly, in the agricultural sector, there are farms which a number of farms have actually shrunk. People have abandoned some of the arable lands on which they should be producing goods. We think that these are parts of the idling capacities that must be ramped up, powered on, hire more workers, and make more production. Remember, once you increase the level of supply of goods in the economy, whatever little you would have increased the public service wages with would not have any inflationary effect or pressure. So that is the first part. The second part is that the Minister of Finance, but also the governor of the Reserve Bank, are actually having a very problematic approach to solving our problems. They think that the only way to do is to manage the levels of debt rather than to ensure that you deal with the real problems that our economy is facing. In our view, the public service is actually catering about 70 to 80% of the population of the country, from education to health and other services. If you do not increase the public sector wage bill, you are running a risk of going forward with what they call headcount reduction. And headcount reduction has had dire effects because it has led to understaffing, which in the main has led to various hours of hospitals being cut. For instance, you would have seen in Begersford where a poor woman gave birth in front of a clinic gate because that clinic could not operate 24 hours. They'd cut the hours from 24 to 12 hours. And this is because the government has targeted the public sector wage bill, cut it, and in the process, they are not filling posts which become vacant as a result either of death or of retirement. And that has significantly lowered the number of workers, the nurses, the healthcare workers, and other skills in that particular profession. So our problem is around that. If you do not increase the public sector wage bill, you do not stand a chance of ensuring that you expand the headcount in the public sector, especially in the public service, so that the schools, the clinics, hospitals, public correctional service, police stations, traffic offices, including social development offices, would have lesser workers, and lesser workers means lesser services to our people. That is the reason why people continue to complain about adequate services.
So, Trevor, have you made, as SAFTU, have you made these concerns, very valid concerns, have you made these concerns voiced to the people who matter? Are they aware of this issue? Because they still go on to say they defend their stance by suggesting that based on their revenue forecasts, the wage bill would, obviously public sector, would absorb 37% of fiscal revenue per year. This is what they're saying. On the one hand, you are saying that these public service entities need to have a wage increase so that they're motivated to work, they're motivated to service the people of South Africa, and they're talking a different language to you. Added to that, you're also suggesting that manufacture should be ramped up, should be reintroduced. But we know what we're facing here in the country. We're facing the issues with continuous load shedding, water shedding, and wait for this one, fuel shedding as well. So we are truly in a tight corner. Where and how do we move forward? And as unions who represent 80% of the population in the country, maybe your voices should be heard in the right places and to make things start happening. We need to address Eskom. We need to address Rand Water. We need to address the Fuel Association of South Africa, because if that is not addressed by people like you, the unions, with all of the manpower you have behind you, we ain't going anywhere far very soon.
Our problems have been precipitated by the lack of proper management in government, mismanagement, incompetence of our leadership. The very people actually who currently are trying to impose budget cuts on the nation are the ones who have mismanaged the problems we are facing today. For instance, with Eskom, which of course any economy must be powered, and the energy is central to any economy. So in this instance, the policies they would have passed 98, 2000, in which they put a moratorium on Eskom being able to expand its energy generation capacity. That has actually led to these problems we are facing today. They cannot be the first ones to tell us that we are experiencing load shedding, whereas they're the first ones who actually are the ones who gave us these problems. We were not having problems of energy in particular in this country, because Eskom was one of the best performing stayed under the prices globally at the end of the second millennia and the beginning of the third millennia. So that is the first part. The second part is that indeed they've opened the country after they took power and introduced liberal democracy. They then adopted neoliberalism as a program of economic development, which in my view is a program of economic and social underdevelopment. And because of that, what you then have had is that through trade liberalization, which is one of key tools of neoliberalism, they have then led to the death of the manufacturing sector in this country. The deindustrialization that followed thereof has actually led to the idling capacity, which has been increasing since 1996 up until today. The manufacturing sector itself has shed too many jobs. If you compare the jobs in the manufacturing sector today to what they were in 2008 at the time of the financial crisis, you'll realize that the difference is that it has shed and never recovered about 800,000 jobs. That is a whooping number, which in our view, if we were to ramp up and begin to power on the idling capacity in the manufacturing sector, not only are you going to increase production, which will elevate the fears, but also alleviate the possibilities of inflation, because you would have too many goods circulating in the economy. You will also be able to absorb as many young people who currently are idling, and because they are idling, they resort to criminal activities to make end meet. So these are the problems. Now, back to the public sector wage bill. The Treasury in particular, I said in the negotiations, one of the things they presented at the beginning of the public service negotiations is that they said that they bring what you just read, they bring these comparisons, like percentage comparisons of how much does the public sector wage bill constitute of the entire fiscus or government budget, right? And then they tell you that it's 33% or 34%, and we need to significantly lower that because currently it is higher than any other area of expenditure on government. But these are just quantitative comparisons. They have no bearing, in my view, on what government could do. You see, the reason why the public sector wage bill has constituted a little bit part of all other areas of public expenditure is because government is not increasing expenditure in other areas. Why is it not increasing expenditure in other areas? It is over the past years, it has actually staffed the public service and other sectors. For instance, the state corporations. State corporations between 2014 and 2019 were actually staffed of increases by 54%. Between 1998 and 2001, there were declines in terms of budget allocations of about 41.9%. And this is just the state corporations. If you come into general government expenditure, which includes public services, you realize that we've, in other areas and in other periods, we've had serious contractionary budget in that particular instance. But secondly, we've also had below inflation increases for such particular budgets. So necessarily, these things had to go below the public sector wage bill. So today we are saying, no, increase the public servants' wages, but also increase the public sector wage bill so that you hire more workers. But in addition to that, increase budget on general government expenditure. For instance, you need infrastructure for schools. You need infrastructure for communities. You need equipment for schools. You need equipment for hospitals. You need equipment for police stations to be able to operate adequately and give our people a quality service. If you do that, because this is just a quantitative comparison of the government wage bill vis-a-vis the government general expenditure, that gap will just automatically shrink once you increase expenditure for other areas of public spending. So that is what they must do. We are in a serious backlog of infrastructure, in a serious backlog. Many schools do not have libraries, do not have laboratories. If you increase budgets for that, you would have that particular quantitative comparison actually changing, and public sector wage bill will merely constitute a little fraction of what currently is being flagged out by the minister and also the Reserve Bank governor to say, no, the public sector wage bill is crowding out other areas of expenditure because it's too much, it's too bloated, which we disagree with. And we think, and this is illustrated in some of the documents, in the report by the IMF last year for 2021, which was published this year in February, they say that the areas which are actually problematic in government expenditure is the public sector wage bill and the state corporations. So what government is actually doing here is to listen to financial institutions of capitalism whilst ignoring the cries of our people in the country.
Well said indeed. My final question to you, Trevor, then is, I kind of don't have any hope that they're going to increase the public sector wage bill. They're sticking to their guns at 3%. What is the next step as far as SAFTU is concerned?
We also, like you, feel that they're not going to do anything. That's why in our statement we said that we are hopeless and pessimistic because they are committed to these programs. These programs are not only for them, but they are also trying to please, as I said in my last segment, that they are trying to please the international finance capital in the form of its institutions, World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. So because we are pessimistic and do not think they are going to bring any changes, they are not going to change the trajectory of budget cuts, we think that, and this we have been saying, workers and the working class at large must begin to organize to fight for concrete gains. The first part of that particular battle has to take place in the public service, where the trade unions in the Public Service Coordinating Bargaining Council have rejected the 3%, and unions constituting about 76% of the vote weight in the PSCBC are actually united against the 3% and demand between 8 and 10% increase. So that is the first part. But the communities and community organizations, civics, and the youth organizations must also come to the party, because what we are fighting for there is actually, if you look at it in a broader sense, is actually what affects them. They cry that we do not open. For instance, they were blaming that poor nurse who refused to open that clinic because he said that the opening hours have not yet started. I'm not going to help you because, so they were blaming her. But if you look at it in a real sense, the worker was correct. was not supposed to open there. If anything, to open there was merely going to be a moral obligation, not a legal obligation, not a contractual obligation. So the problems that the problems of inadequate service, the poor services which are being delivered in the public service from schools to correctional services, where the ratio of workers to people and patients they are servicing is so widening, those problems can be addressed if we were to fight together and force government to change its fiscal and monetary policy path. If we do not do that, government will
We are
continue to be
doomed. We are doomed.
continue trajectory.
Unfortunately,
So we
Trevor,
are
I'm going to have to leave it there. Good luck. I do hope that things do pan out differently, but it's a very, very strong message indeed that you've given out to us this morning. Let me just end off here with a tweet by Faisal Khan. It's a Facebook message. He says, "We have even less disposable income now that the country debt has quadrupled." So yeah, a very dire state indeed. But we're going to watch this very closely and possibly
that
talk
tweet
with you
wrong.
again.
That tweet is wrong.
Pardon?
That tweet is wrong. It is premised on a misunderstanding of monetary and fiscal operations. Government's debt is actually the private sector surplus. When they are running a debt and a deficit, the money is actually with us, it's not with government. When government runs a surplus by taxing us and by performing interest rates, they are taking money to their coffers, and the people, including households and the private sector, small and medium enterprises, are also stuffed. So that is based on a serious misunderstanding. That's what Khanyago and them actually understand it that way. But thank you very much.
Thank you indeed. We will try and unpack that in a future program. I too have misunderstood that, but it might be referring to overseas debt as well. I mean, we're owing the whole world loads of money, but we need to leave till next time. Our next guest is on standby. I'm going to have to leave it there, unfortunately. Thank you indeed for your time. It is exactly 9:40 a.m. News and views on Salam Media. Never enough time to unpack everything in detail. But hey, there you have it in a nutshell.